osteoporosis. Okay, so if you were to look at the image on the screen, you would see two sets of bones. The one on the right is actually the normal bone. The one on the the one on the left is actually the normal bones. The one on the right is actually the osteoporotic bone. So if you look at the main difference between these two bone structure is actually the density of the bones. Okay, the healthy bones on the left, they do not have as much holes in between the linkages as compared to the osteoporotic bone, which is on the right. You'll notice that the holes are a lot bigger. Okay, and as a result of that, the linkages between the bone structure tends to be thinner, weaker, and they are more prone to fractures. So osteoporosis basically means our bones are porous. Okay, and what causes the bones to be porous is that the minerals within our bones, which are predominantly calcium, they are lost. Okay, and as a result of that, people with osteoporosis are at high risk of fractures and breaking of the bone. Okay, so I will talk a little bit more about the function of calcium when I talk about the dietary measures that we can take to improve our bone mineral density later on. All right, so let's take a look at the prevalence of osteoporosis. Okay, so earlier on, we learned that women are at higher risk of osteoporosis as compared to men. So 1 in 3 women over the age of 50 years old will experience osteoporotic fractures. In comparison to men, 1 in 5 men will experience osteoporotic fracture. Okay, so the reason why women are at higher risk of osteoporosis is because of the female hormones that we have dominant in the body. All right, so for females, our dominant hormones is actually called estrogen. Okay, and estrogen plays a very important role in helping to maintain our bone mineral density. However, for women, as we enter menopause, that's where our estrogen levels starts to fall, and that is also the reason why our bone mineral density can be affected, and we are at higher risk of osteoporosis as compared to men. Okay, but that does not mean that men will not get osteoporosis, because in the quiz question, we also learned that it can happen to anyone at any age, even though the risk is higher among women, and the risk is also higher for individuals who are over the age of 50 years old. Okay, so if we look at osteoporotic fracture, the three main area that an osteoporotic fracture can happen is actually our wrist, okay, our spine, as well as our hip. Okay, so as you can see in the image on the bottom right hand corner, these three areas are the areas that are more prone to osteoporotic fracture. Okay, so the consequences of osteoporotic fracture, okay, could result in chronic neck or back pain. Okay, it could also result in a stoop or a hunched posture. Okay, so that's when you start to realize that you might experience a decline in height. Okay, or your bones become extremely prone to breakage or fracture with little or no trauma. Okay, so it can be as simple as you knocking into maybe the corner of the table and suddenly the bones just break. So that could be the consequences of osteoporotic fracture. And a lot of times, specifically for hip fracture actually requires surgery. And because it affects the mobility, it can also result in the loss of independence or death, and definitely a reduced quality of life. Okay, so why osteoporosis is considered a silent disease is because a lot of people actually do not know that they have osteoporosis until they experience an osteoporotic fracture. And upon further investigation of the fracture, then they realize that, oh, they are actually osteoporotic. Okay, so that is the reason why it is known as a silent disease. So Singapore specifically, we have actually one of the highest incidence of hip fractures for women above the age of 50 years old within the Asia region. Okay, so the risk of osteoporosis in Singapore is actually very high. So if you look at the chart on the right hand side, okay, that gives us a rough idea, okay, of the prevalence of hip fractures within a year. Okay, so if you compare again women and men, the incidence of hip fractures among women is higher as compared to men, and the average hospital stay due to hip fracture can be up to about 3 weeks long. Okay, and that will definitely again compromise the quality of life and increase the financial burden due to the hospital stay. So we are also predicting that in Singapore, we in the next 50 years or more, okay, the prevalence of osteoporotic fracture is going to increase. And the reason for that is because we are experiencing a aging population, and by 2030, at least 1 in 4 will be over the age of 65 years old. Okay, so this prevalence is gonna rise. So what is the main problem that contributes to this increased prevalence of osteoporosis? Okay, so a study conducted by Health Promotion Board back in 2005 found out that 7 in 10 Singaporeans actually knew the seriousness of osteoporosis. However, only 1 in 10 can cite 2 ways to prevent osteoporosis, and that is through regular exercise and a high calcium diet. And 8 in 10 did not actually know that exercising regularly could prevent osteoporosis. So, what could actually be part of the problem is actually the lack of awareness on what we can do in order to prevent osteoporosis. Okay, so that is the reason why the main focus of our topic today is to actually focus on the prevention of osteoporosis. Okay, but before that, we also want to identify whether we are at risk of osteoporosis or not. Okay, so on the screen right now, you would see a couple of statements, okay, to assess whether you are at risk of osteoporosis. I'm going to leave this slide on for about 30 seconds. Quickly glance through the statements and see whether these statements here are applicable to you or not. Okay, so mainly these statements revolved around age group, revolved around your family history, your medical history. It also revolves around your body size, okay, your lifestyle habits, as well as your physical activity. And specifically for women, questions targeting whether you have entered menopause or whether you have gone through surgical procedures to remove your ovaries before. Okay, so these are some of the statements here to assess whether you are at risk of osteoporosis. Okay, there's also another quick screening tool of what we call, in short, is called the OSTA. OSTA actually stands for Osteoporosis Self-Assessment Tool for Asians. Okay, so this tool here is to guide and help Asian women to assess our risk of osteoporosis. So it's very simple. It's actually a correlation of our age versus our weight. Okay, so if I am 60 years old and I weigh 50 kilograms, okay, that actually puts me at a moderate risk of osteoporosis. Okay, however, I just also want to highlight that if you look at this chart here, right, you'll also notice that the heavier you are, the lower your risk of osteoporosis. Okay, but very importantly, we are not encouraging you to increase your weight or to gain weight in order for you to reduce your risk of osteoporosis. Okay, this is merely just a screening tool. We still want you to achieve a healthy BMI because being overweight can also increase the pressure around your bones as well. All right, so this is just simply a quick screening tool here. Okay, so most importantly, osteoporosis is preventable, okay, because our bones are living organs. Okay, minerals are deposited and withdrawn from our bones daily. Okay, so earlier on, remember the image that we saw, the osteoporotic bones are very porous. They have large holes in between the structures. Okay, and what causes these large holes is because minerals found in the bones are being withdrawn from the bones into the bloodstream, resulting in holes in our bone structure. Okay, and what are these minerals? Okay, predominantly that will include calcium. So when will calcium be withdrawn from your bones into the bloodstream is when your bloodstream is lacking in calcium, and that's where your body needs to withdraw the calcium stores in the bones into the bloodstream because calcium has very important functions in the body, which includes regulating muscle function and nervous system function. So when your body starts to realize that there is insufficient calcium in the blood, they will start to draw calcium from the bones, and that's where the porous, that's where the holes in the bones can actually form. So it's very important to envision our bones like a piggy bank. Okay, the more you invest or the more you deposit this calcium in your bones from infancy till 30 years old, that guarantees you with more savings of these calcium stores so that when you gradually start to lose this calcium, you will still have sufficient calcium stores within the bones. All right, so again, the need to build up healthy bones here is actually since young. And as we age, what we aim to do is to reduce the loss of calcium from our bones through lifestyle measures. Okay, so healthy diet and lifestyle is equally important for both men and female, and regardless of age, whether you are younger than 30 or whether you're older than 30, you can still make changes to your lifestyle. All right, so right now we just want to go through the 5 steps for osteoporosis prevention. Okay, so step 1 is through our diet. Step two is through having sufficient calcium and vitamin D. Step 3, through exercising. Step 4, dropping bad habits. And step 5, to go for a bone density test and to seek treatment when appropriate. Okay, so first, let's talk about the first step, which is through diet. So most importantly, we want to encourage a balanced diet using My Healthy Plate. I'm sure this My Healthy Plate is not foreign to you. You might have seen it, you might have heard it, you might have tried to follow My Healthy Plate when you're planning your own meals. Okay, but we can't emphasize the importance of having a balanced diet when it comes to osteoporosis prevention as well. Okay, so if you look at My Healthy Plate, half of that plate is actually filled with fruits and vegetables. A quarter of that plate filled with your whole grains, which can include your brown rice, your wholemeal bread. And the last quarter of that plate is actually filled with your meat and others, which include your tofu, your fish, your lean meat, your eggs, even your beans and lentils. Okay, so that is what we aim to achieve to have a balanced diet. So what are some of the key foods that can help to build up our bone mineral density? These would be our dairy food. So for example, like our milk, our yogurt, our cheese. Okay, they are a rich source of calcium and vitamin D. Okay, so here I just want to tell a little bit about the relationship between calcium and vitamin D. Okay, so vitamin D actually helps to facilitate calcium absorption. So if you are consuming a lot of calcium-rich foods in your diet, but there is insufficient vitamin D, it might also mean that your body cannot fully utilize the calcium that you consume from your food sources. So calcium and vitamin D works hand in hand in order for you to improve your bone mineral density. Okay, so what we can do is to include some of these dairy foods as part of our meals and snacks. So for example, we can have milk for breakfast. We can have yogurt topped up with some seeds, nuts, or fruits as a snack. Or we can have cheese either on our bread for breakfast or cheese on our crackers for snacks. So these are just some ways that we can incorporate these dairy foods as part of our meals and snacks. But definitely, apart from dairy foods, the specific nutrients for optimal bone health will include calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, protein, fats, zinc, B vitamins, as well as magnesium. Okay, so right now I just want to ask, okay, where do you think we can what food sources actually contains vitamin D. Okay, so please use the chat box function and type in your responses. What kind of food sources actually contains vitamin D? Okay, since we mentioned that vitamin D is essential to help calcium absorb into our body, right? So what kind of food actually contains vitamin D? Okay, you may use the chat box function to type in your answers in the chat box. So let me know what are some food sources of vitamin D. Say sun. Okay, so SK says salmon. All right. Um, Alice says milk. Tin says milk. Ariel says some say sardine. Green leafy vegetables. Green leafy vegetables. Tuna. Okay. So actually, okay, I just want to share that. Okay, I just want to share that for vitamin D. Okay, so our sources of vitamin D here actually includes tuna, salmon, sardines, okay, egg yolk specifically, okay, as well as definitely non-food sources will include our sunlight. Okay, for milk, it could be milk that are fortified with vitamin D. If the milk is fortified with vitamin D, then yes, they are a source of vitamin D. Okay, so salmon, swordfish, tuna, sardines, mushrooms, egg yolk, fortified milk, fortified cereals, these could be sources of vitamin D. Okay, for sunlight, as we live in a sunny island, Singapore, okay, the best way for you to obtain vitamin D is actually, yes, through sunlight. Okay, next we talk about vitamin K. Okay, so I noticed some of you also mentioned or make a guess that green leafy vegetables are a source of vitamin D. Okay, however, green leafy vegetables are not a source of vitamin D. Green leafy vegetables are a source of vitamin K. Okay, so vitamin K is also very important to build up our bone mineral density, and these may include your spinach, your lettuce, your cabbage, your kailan, your Shanghai greens. Okay, all these green leafy vegetables are a source of vitamin K, and they are also important to build up your bone health. Okay, protein definitely is not something new to us. If you look at my healthy plate, you will know what are the sources of protein, like I mentioned earlier, like your eggs, tofu, seeds, nuts, lean protein, seafood. Okay, for fats, we are talking about healthy fats here, not the fats that can be found in your fried chicken, okay, but the healthy fats. So can you share with me what are some food sources that you can include in your diet to have these healthy fats? Okay, what are some of the food sources that contains healthy fats? Okay, Ellie says avocado, Adeline says salmon. Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, Christina says nuts. Yeah, that's right as well. Okay, so those are all good examples of healthy fats. Vivian says olive oil. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Okay, so healthy fats, like you all are aware and know, okay, like avocado, oily fish, like tuna, salmon, your seeds and nuts, like your chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, almonds, or even the type of oil that you use at home, the cooking oil, be it olive oil, soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, all of these are actually good sources of healthy fats. And why fats is important, right? Is because vitamin D and vitamin K, they are fat soluble vitamins, meaning to say that they are best absorbed in the body when there are also healthy fats in the body. All right, and that is the reason why we need some fats in our diet to facilitate the vitamin D and vitamin K absorption. Okay, then we have zinc and magnesium. Okay, so zinc and magnesium, a lot of times for zinc specifically, you can find zinc in our seafood, you can find zinc in our meat, our poultry, you can also find them in seeds, nuts, and whole grains. Okay, for magnesium you can find them in your seeds, nuts, and whole grains as well. Okay, so if you think about it, all these food sources here actually correlates back to my healthy plate because we have our vegetables, we have our protein, we have our healthy fats, we have our whole grains, and all of these are part of my healthy plate. And that is the reason why we emphasize the need to have a balanced diet. Okay, so everybody so far so good. If you are still with me, you can give me a thumbs up or maybe just a smiley face in the chat box so that I know that you're still following me through well. All right, great, thank you. Okay, so for those of us here who might not be able to tolerate dairy, okay, then that's where we do also have some alternative calcium-rich sources. Okay, so example would be fish with edible bones, like our sardines as well as our ikan bilis. Okay, but I just want to also highlight that for sardines, because sardines more often than not, they come in the canned form. Okay, and for canned food, we are also aware that they have higher sodium content. Okay, so sodium in layman term is actually our salt, and too much sodium in our diet can actually affect calcium absorption. It can actually reduce our calcium absorption. So when it comes to sardine, our recommendation for you is you can actually remove the sardine from the sauces in the can and stir fry your sardines with your own natural ingredients instead. So you can actually stir fry your sardines together with your fresh onions, your fresh tomatoes to create your own homemade sauce for your sardines that can help to reduce the sodium content, and that will be more efficient in helping your body to absorb the calcium. Okay, the thing about ikan bilis as well, if you're going to use the ikan bilis to boil your soup broth, but you're not actually eating the ikan bilis, then you are not actually reaping the benefits of calcium. In order for you to obtain calcium, you need to consume the edible bones within the ikan bilis as well. Okay, but remember, ikan bilis are also very high in sodium. So before you use your ikan bilis, we recommend that you actually rinse your ikan bilis in maybe warm water a couple of times before you actually use them for cooking or even in your soups. Okay. Next, we can also use tofu that is made of calcium salts or even tau gua. So if you compare tofu and tau gua actually has slightly higher amount of calcium as compared to tofu. So both tofu and tau gua can be a very good source of calcium as well. Then we have our lentils, which are like our beans and pulses. You can have maybe if you cook dal curry. Okay, dal is actually an example of lentils. Your beans, your pulses like red beans, green beans, chickpeas, they are also good source of calcium as well. Okay, then we have green leafy vegetables that we mentioned earlier, as well as calcium fortified foods such as bread, cereals, soy milk, or even juices. So if you take a look at the soy milk carton on the bottom right hand of the screen, okay, the label actually says unsweetened high calcium fresh soy milk. Okay, so for soy milk, I just want to emphasize that soy milk purchased in the supermarket that are packaged have higher calcium content as compared to soy milk freshly prepared maybe in the markets or in the food courts or in certain specialty shops. Okay, freshly made soy milk will not have as high calcium content as compared to those that are fortified in the supermarket. All right, so we do encourage you to consume a variety of food to meet your calcium requirement daily. So next question you might be thinking would then be, how much calcium should I be consuming daily to in order for it to be sufficient? Okay, so according to the National Nutrition Survey, the average daily calcium intake of a Singaporean in Singapore is actually only about 627 mg, and that is below the recommended daily allowance. Okay, so if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, for adults aged 18 to 50 years old, we actually require 800 milligrams of calcium daily. For adults above 50 years old, for those who are pregnant or breastfeeding, they actually require a higher amount of calcium, up to about 1,000 milligrams of calcium daily. Okay, so how can we actually meet our calcium requirement? Okay, that's where we can look at the table in the middle. Okay, in the table, in the middle, we actually have our food sources and the corresponding calcium content. Okay, so for example, under the dairy products, if you are drinking your low-fat milk, that will give you about 380 milligrams of calcium. If you have a carton of low-fat yogurt, those individual serving size, that is also another 240 milligrams of calcium. If you look at the non-dairy segment, okay, earlier on we talked about tau gua. Just one small piece of tau gua will give you about 150 milligrams of calcium. For your green leafy vegetables like kailan, that will give you about close to 200 milligrams of calcium as well. Okay, and last but not least, under the calcium fortified products, if you are drinking a high calcium soy milk, just one glass will give you about 450 milligrams of calcium already. Okay, so right now I just want to do a little exercise with you. Okay, so if we require, okay, we take the average, okay, if you require about 800 to 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day, okay, so on average, maybe about 900 milligrams of calcium per day. If we divide 900 milligrams of calcium per day into 3 meals that we are going to have, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, okay, that would mean that on average, we require about 300 milligrams of calcium per meal, okay? The reason why we also want to consume our calcium gradually throughout the day during our breakfast, lunch, and dinner is because calcium is best absorbed in smaller quantities of such as 500 milligrams. So if you're going to have 1,000 milligrams of calcium all together at one time, your body may be overloaded and they may not be able to effectively utilize all 1,000 milligrams of calcium that you consume in a single setting. Okay, which is the reason why we highly encourage that you spread out your calcium intake throughout the day. And the best way to do it is to be intentional in including calcium-rich sources in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay, so the mini exercise that I would like to do with all of us here is to think about breakfast. Okay, how can you achieve 300 milligrams of calcium from your breakfast? What kind of food sources can you include in your breakfast in order to meet at least 300 milligrams of calcium? Okay, so similarly, I would like you to use the checkbox function to type in what are some breakfast ideas that can help you to meet your calcium requirement. Okay, so maybe I can start with an example first. Okay, so maybe for me, for breakfast, I have half a glass of milk with coffee. Okay, so half a glass of milk will give me about 190 milligrams of calcium. And then I have a slice of wholemeal bread with one slice of low-fat cheese. Okay, because one slice of low-fat cheese is already 200 milligrams of calcium. So if I take 200 plus 190, that gives me about 390 milligrams of calcium just from breakfast alone. Okay, so what are some of the other examples you can think of? Right? Yeah, thank you, Dorothy, for sharing. So we have cheese, milk with bread with 2 eggs. Okay, good. That's a good example. Okay, so you have cheese, which is a good source of calcium. You have milk with the coffee, which is also a good source of calcium. And also added bonus in your breakfast is that by consuming wholemeal bread, you actually have zinc, you actually have magnesium, and the eggs actually contains vitamin D. Okay, so that is a good breakfast idea. But of course, we also encourage you to have variety in breakfast. Does not mean that every day you have eggs and cheese, okay? Because at the end of the day, they are still some source of fat and some cholesterol. So try to mix up your breakfast option. Okay. Yeah. Okay. With beans and okay. Beans, yes. Okay, beans is a good source of protein. In terms of calcium, yes, they do contain calcium as well, but maybe not as much. Okay, but for the coffee, it's important to add some milk to the coffee in order for you to increase your calcium content. Okay, for the enriched bread, it is possible to find calcium enriched bread. So if you're having calcium enriched bread, then yes, you can actually meet the calcium requirement as well. Okay, wholemeal bread with peanut butter and a slice of cheese, soy milk. Yeah, soy milk is a good one, but remember, should be defortified soy milk. Okay, oatmeal, yes, if you are using maybe soy milk or milk to cook your oatmeal, then yeah, that will be good source of calcium as well. Okay, so there's a question from Alice talking about coffee preventing the absorption of calcium, right? So yes, it is true that excessive caffeine consumption can interfere with calcium absorption. So later on, when we are talking about the habits to drop, we also want to address the caffeine intake. So it's only when you consume caffeine excessively, then yes, that can actually impede the absorption of calcium in the body. Okay, so good, thank you. So I think you guys got the hang of it. Okay, so it's really about intentionally including some high calcium food sources in your diet in order to meet your requirement. So it is not difficult to meet your requirement because, for example, for lunch and for dinner, if you are going to have a serving of green leafy vegetables, and maybe a serving of tau kwa, for your lunch and maybe a serving of other source of protein, for example, like maybe your sardine for dinner, okay, that will actually allow you to meet your requirements already. Okay, if you can't meet your requirements from just your three main meals, you can always fortify your requirements through your snack, such as having a cup of yogurt for your snack or maybe a cup of low-fat soy milk for your snack in order for you to meet the requirement. Okay, so at the end of the day, it is possible to meet our requirement. It's just a matter of in being intentional in choosing the right types of food. Okay, so some tips for those who are lactose intolerant. So basically, lactose is the sugar that are found in our dairy sources. So people who are lactose intolerant, they basically have problems digesting lactose. Okay, so some tips to help people with lactose intolerant is actually to gradually increase the serving size of dairy food products. Okay, or to complement dairy food products with a meal of solids. So maybe you cannot drink a glass of milk on an empty stomach. You need to drink your glass of milk together with your breakfast, such as your sandwich or maybe with your oatmeal, and that will allow your body to tolerate the soy milk or the dairy food a little bit better. Okay, or you can try dairy foods that are lower in their lactose content. So for example, like our hard cheeses like cheddar, Swiss or Parmesan, they have slightly lower lactose as compared to soft cheeses. Okay, or you can go for yogurt made with live active bacteria, which is a popular thing to do because people actually cultivate their own yogurt at home. Okay, and those yogurt that are cultivated live, they actually have lower amount of lactose as well. Okay, so these are just some tips for those who are lactose intolerant. Okay, so if you don't like to drink milk, then what can you do? You can add low-fat milk to your oatmeal or any cream types of soups. So for example, if you are making a mushroom, cream of mushroom, or if you are making a cream of broccoli or corn soup, okay, that's where you can actually add milk to this oatmeal or soups in order to increase the calcium content or to add coffee and Milo, to add milk to your coffee and Milo as well. Okay, All right, next, some ideas for your yogurt. You can enjoy plain yogurt, like I've shared earlier, with some fruits or some nuts for your snack or your after meal dessert. You can make a yogurt parfait, which is basically layering your yogurt with maybe some raw oats with some fruits as a dessert for your parties. Okay, or you can even add some Greek yogurt into your cooking if you want, for example, to make a curry, okay, you want to thicken the curry, you can actually omit the coconut milk and to replace them with Greek yogurt to actually achieve that thick consistency as well. Okay, lastly, you can also use milk for your smoothies. You can actually add milk, yogurt, and fresh fruits and to blend them into a smoothie if you don't really like to drink milk on its own. Okay, so these are just some tips and ideas that you can incorporate to your dietary habits. All right, so earlier on, we talked about the food sources of vitamin D. So on the image here, you would see mushrooms, salmon, eggs, fortified foods. All of these are good sources of vitamin D. Okay, but the easiest way for you to obtain vitamin D is really through the natural sunlight that we have in Singapore. Okay, so for the natural sunlight exposure, we do encourage you to get at least daily amount of sunshine of about 15 to 20 minutes a day between 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Okay, so while you are already out in the sunlight, we also encourage you to engage in some physical activity because physical activity does help to improve your bone mineral density as well. Okay, so, in terms of one of the reasons why there are actually a high prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in Singapore is that we spend too much time indoor. Okay, especially if we are working in an office setting, we actually spend the crucial hours indoor working, and we don't actually expose ourselves to sufficient sunlight. Okay, and that could actually result in vitamin D deficiency. So we need to be intentional in exposing our skin to the daily sun. Okay, and the amount of skin that you expose, as well as the type of clothing that you wear, the amount of sunscreen that you put on, all of these will have an impact in terms of how much sunlight your body can actually absorb. So people with fairer skin tone might actually have a bit more difficulty in absorbing the sunlight as compared to people with a slightly darker skin tone. Okay, so all of this we do encourage you to get at least 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight a day. Okay, so yes, I do understand, Vivian, that between 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. is actually really hot. So you can try to go right at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. It's a good timing. Okay, or maybe lunchtime when you just go out to tapao for lunch, you can go out slightly earlier. Not the 12 p.m. sun, but maybe the 11:30, just a short 15 minutes. Okay, that will be already be sufficient. Okay, so when I talk about exercising, what type of exercise will be good and useful for building up our bone mineral density? Okay, that includes our weight-bearing exercise and resistance exercise. Okay, so these two exercises can actually help to build and maintain strong bones, prevent falls and fractures. And for those who already experience fracture, it will help to speed up rehabilitation as well. Okay, so I just want to pose another question. Okay, can you name me some examples of weight-bearing exercises? All right, so again, use the chat box function to share with me what are some examples of weight-bearing exercises. Okay, so some Jia Yi says squats, lunges. All right. Okay, what else? Anyone else has other answers? What are some examples of weight-bearing exercise? Okay, Dorothy says dumbbells. Okay, Jenny says carrying of weights. Okay. Okay, anyone else? Okay, Sam says jogging. Okay, climbing the stairs. Sin says dumbbells. All right. Okay, so among the answers, okay, I would say that the answers given are a combination of weight bearing and resistance exercise. Okay, so weight bearing exercise would include things like your squats, your lunges, carrying a baby. Okay, carrying a baby. If you are walking around while carrying a baby, yes, that's considered a weight bearing exercise. Jogging is considered a weight bearing exercise. Climbing stairs is considered a weight bearing exercise. But if you are carrying your dumbbells, carrying your weights, carrying your baby without walking, those are considered resistance exercise. Okay, so the definition of weight bearing exercises and resistance exercise are on the screen right now. Okay, so weight bearing exercises are those that you do on your feet, supporting your body weight. Okay, so any exercise that requires your feet to move, okay, to have the up down movement, that your heel is touching the ground and creating that impact as you walk. Okay, that is considered weight bearing exercise. So that includes your brisk walking, dancing, stair climbing, your tai chi. Okay, all these are considered weight bearing exercises. But carrying of your weights or your dumbbells, okay, that is more towards the resistance exercises that work your muscles against the resistance. Okay, so some exercises, for example, like push-ups, or for example, if you go in your neighborhood, you see people using stretch bands to exercise, those are considered resistance exercise. So both weight-bearing exercise and resistance exercise will actually help to improve your bone mineral density. Okay, so just a quick quiz question. Okay, I want to check in with you to test your understanding of weight bearing exercise. Is cycling considered a weight bearing exercise? Yes or no? Okay, Cynthia says no, Jenny says no, um, Adeline says no, Dorothy says yes. Okay, and the answer is no. Okay, cycling is not considered a weight-bearing exercise. Why? Because we are not using our feet to support our body weight, and our feet is essentially not touching the ground. Okay, so similarly, if you are doing yoga, if you are doing Pilates, those are not considered weight-bearing exercise. Okay, so as simple as walking to buy your lunch is considered a weight-bearing exercise. Okay, walking your dog, walking to your child's school to pick them up, these are all considered weight-bearing exercise. Okay, resistance exercise can include if you go to the supermarket, instead of pushing the trolley, you are carrying the basket. That is considered resistance exercise. Okay, so think about ways of how to include all these simple exercise in your daily routine to build up your bone mineral density. Okay, but again, we just want to share that if you haven't been exercising regularly or you haven't been exercising at all, we do highly encourage that you start gradually. And if you have any pre-medical conditions or history of a fall or a fracture, we do encourage you to actually consult your doctor before you engage in any exercise regime. Okay, so we do encourage at least about 150 minutes of physical activity in a week. Okay, so Dorothy asked, what are the benefits of cycling? Okay, so benefits of cycling is actually a type of cardio exercise, okay, which is what we call like aerobic exercise. So it does help to increase your heart rate. It does help to improve your lung capacity as well. So those are also good because they are considered cardio activity, and that will help to improve your heart health as well as your lung health. Okay. So step number 4 is to drop the bad habits. So definitely number 1 is to quit smoking. Okay, because smoking actually causes bone loss. Number 2 is to avoid excessive drinking. Okay, because excessive drinking can reduce the body's ability to absorb calcium. So we actually recommend under Health Promotion Board that for men in a day, no more than 2 standard drinks, and for women in a day, no more than 1 standard drink. Limiting or avoiding alcohol is best for the bone health. So what are examples of standard drink? Okay, so one standard drink is equivalent to a can of beer, which is 330 ml. It's equivalent to half a glass of wine, which is about 100 ml, or 30 ml of hard liquor. Okay, so these are individual examples of one standard drinks. For men, no more than two in a day. For women, no more than one in a day. Okay, and the last habit is to reduce our intake of caffeine, which earlier on someone did ask whether caffeine can actually interfere with calcium absorption. Okay, so caffeine can come from our coffee, tea, or soft drink. So try to manage your caffeine intake. Okay, so it's okay to drink up to 1 or 2 cups of coffee per day, okay, but not anything more than that because excessive caffeine intake can actually inhibit your calcium absorption. Okay, and the last step is to go for a bone density check. Okay, if you're at high risk, or even if you're not at high risk and you have not done a bone mineral density check before, you can actually go for a bone mineral density check. Okay, so my mom does go for her bone density check, and you can actually easily do that in the hospitals. Okay, so a bone mineral density test is the best way to diagnose osteoporosis. It's actually using this technology called the dual energy X-ray. And what they do is to actually measure the amount of bone minerals in specific areas of bones in the body, usually the hip or the spine. Okay, so this can be done through the hospitals and they are actually painless and non-invasive and very fast. Okay, so you can consider going for bone mineral density test if you've not done one yourself, or according to the checklist earlier on, you realize that you're at risk of osteoporosis. Okay, last but not least, we just want to talk a little bit about supplements before we conclude today's talk. Okay, so as you can see, the best supplement is none. Okay, so remember earlier on from the little exercise that we did, how can we have sufficient calcium in a day? We actually realized that it's not difficult to meet our calcium requirement. All we need to do is to be intentional in choosing the right type of calcium-rich food. Okay, so it is possible to obtain sufficient calcium from natural food sources. However, for certain individuals following a vegan diet, those who are lactose intolerant, those who might have underlying medical conditions, receiving treatment or certain medications that interfere with calcium absorption, or has a history of osteoporosis, in these specific conditions, then calcium supplements might be required. And it's always best to talk to your doctor before you determine what kind of calcium supplements to go for. Okay, so when you're choosing calcium supplements, remember to read the labels because a lot of times calcium supplements might be sold together with other nutrients, for example, like vitamin D or magnesium. Okay, check for any possible interaction, especially if you're also already consuming some medications prescribed by the doctor. Okay, always check with your doctor or pharmacist for any possible interaction with the calcium supplements. Okay, different calcium supplements might have different tolerability. Some potential side effects of calcium supplements may include gassiness, bloatedness, or even constipation. So you might be able to tolerate different brands of calcium supplements quite differently. Okay, and we talked about absorbability earlier on. Calcium is best absorbed when taken in small doses at about 500 mg or less when it's spread out throughout the day. Okay, so these are just some considerations when you are choosing your calcium supplements. Okay, and always remember that more isn't always better, especially when it comes to supplements. Okay, always make sure that you consume the supplements according to the recommended dosage and not exceeding the recommended daily allowance. Okay, if you're unsure, always check back with the medical professionals. Okay, so in summary, putting all that we have learned for the past 1 hour, okay, these are the steps that you can take for optimal bone health. Okay, remember, osteoporosis is preventable and you can start improving your bone mineral density at any age. Okay, but if you have young ones at home, do encourage your young ones to start building up their calcium stores in their bones, starting from a young age. Okay, remember to have adequate intake of calcium and vitamin D and regular exercise. So we need about 800 to 1000 milligrams of calcium per day. For vitamin D, you can get 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight exposure daily and take that chance to exercise as well, specifically weight bearing exercise and resistance exercise. Okay, drop bad habits of smoking, excessive alcohol and caffeine, and last but not least, go for a check to determine if you are at risk of osteoporosis or go for a bone mineral density check. All right, so with that, we have actually come to the end of our talk today on osteoporosis prevention. Okay, I hope that you have learned a thing or two, but most importantly, I would encourage and urge all of you to put what you have learned into action, okay, by taking conscious effort to prevent osteoporosis. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll try my best to address them. If you do not have any questions and you have enjoyed our health talk today or you have any feedback to share with us, I highly encourage you to scan the QR code on the screen or to key the URL in your phone or on your laptop to do a short feedback for us. All right, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Adeline asked how I know the product is fortified milk or fortified juice. Okay, so typically if you are buying this product in the supermarket, on the product itself, you would see description about the product. Okay, so for example, if you are buying soy milk, right, you'll notice that the packaging does indicate that they are high calcium soy milk or fortified soy milk. So they will usually indicate that on the packaging. Okay, the other way that you can check whether the product is indeed fortified is to look at the NIP at the back, which stands for Nutrition Information Panel. If you scroll through, look at the specific nutrient called calcium, right? Look at the amount of calcium that the product can give you per 100 ml if you are talking about milk or juice. Okay, because a glass of milk, which is one serving, 250 ml, will give you about 400 mg of calcium. So a fortified milk or a fortified juice essentially should also give you about 400 mg of calcium per serving. Okay, so it's important that you look at the packaging as well as the nutrition information panel. All right, so I hope that answers your question. Okay. Another question, Sam. My wife went for a bone density test, and the doctor suggests taking a medication which will give side effect of gastric and dental recovery. What is your view? I'm afraid I won't be able to advise these questions specifically because I'm not too sure exactly what are the medical conditions or the overall health of your wife. But I suggest if the side effect is intolerable for your wife, then you should speak to the doctor again to see whether there are any alternative medication that might help to reduce the side effect. Okay, because for example, like my grandma, she has also she is a very strict vegetarian and she's lacking in vitamin D and calcium, and she does experience side effects when she consumes the medication that the doctor prescribed. But we spoke to the doctor, and the doctor actually managed to change the medication into something that is more well tolerated by her. So my suggestion is to speak to the doctor and see whether there is any possible change in the medication or not. Okay, thank you.
Rachel, thank you for your advice. But actually, now her main concern is that whether the doctor only recommended either this medicine or there's something called injection, which is very expensive. So these are two choices given to her. So that's why she's very perturbed now, whether should should she take this medicine? But it's okay. I think this. I'm just asking for a view. I'm not
Mm.
too sure whether is it advisable to take also. Yeah.
I think it's best to um speak to the doctor again and really to highlight to the doctor what are some of the discomfort that your wife is facing and see what other alternatives that the doctor can suggest. Most likely they might have other alternative medication, but it's best to speak to the doctor because there might be other underlying factors that the doctor is considering that I'm not aware of as well.
Mm. Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Okay, I'll just answer one last question before I end the session, which is what is the definition of excessive caffeine? Okay, so in terms of caffeine, you can actually go to the Health Hub website because there is actually the recommended amount of caffeine intake per day. But in the general local setting for coffee, it's actually no more than 2 cups of coffee. For tea, if you're talking about those packet tea, not talking about matcha or hojicha that is made using like the powdered form, it can go up to about 5 cups of tea and 2 cups of coffee. Okay, but for specific coffee, because we have different types of coffee, right? We have like the local coffee, the coffee beans, and etc. You can actually go to the Health Hub website, and there's actually a table for you to identify the caffeine intake from the different types of coffee that you might be drinking. But as a general rule of thumb, no more than 2 cups of coffee and no more than 5 cups of tea per day. All right. Okay. So I believe that answers all the questions, and I hope you have enjoyed today's talk. And thank you for joining me once again. And we will end today's session. Have a good day ahead. Thank you.